we wrote this book during the pandemic, and what I wanted to do is create some characters that I felt reflected some of my own family. In fact, the great grandfather is an immigrant from Mexico, and I named him after my father, Jose, and came to to the U.S. and seeking work. Our protagonist, Nick, is the son of a college professor who he came into education and did some things that he wanted to do for his family as well. So as we started developing these characters and wanted to make sure that we included some of our family members with names. In fact, our protagonist, Nick Grego, the Grego is my mom's maiden name, so I wanted to honor her and have her name. What's interesting, as we started to write the story, Mike, with what he experienced with having cancer, also had the death of his brother Steve, who didn't die from cancer, and Steve's a character in the book as well. So our protagonist, Nick, is a young high school student getting ready to graduate from high school. His brother had died about 3 years earlier, and he had a dream of being in the medical profession, but with the death of his brother, he really kind of got angry at big pharmaceutica and medical because of the death. So instead of going to college like his parents had hoped he had done, he decided to take some time off and go do some volunteer work I believe, is Bangkok, and be a teacher's assistant. While there, he comes across, I guess, our villain. Her name is Talia, who sort of seduces him to do some things that are near and dear to his heart, because she wanted to look at some research that was going on in the U.S. that would help, look at vaccines and things like that. So he gets kind of enticed by her, seduced by her, ends up going to Israel to be trained. And once he's finished his training, comes back to the States to sort of continue his mission. In the meantime, this vaccine that's being developed in the U.S. gets stolen, and so our characters are on a trek to try to recover the stolen formula. We kind of wrote this to where, when I started, we're in the pandemic. We're sitting home watching TV and working from home, and I just started this story. And when Mike had got his cancer, he started writing a cancer blog, and his cancer blog was great. He was a great writer. So I sort of challenged him to kind of write with me with this book, and he came through, incredibly well, and started to write about his own experiences with cancer and develop these characters. One thing we didn't mention last time we talked is we get a lot of questions about the title, Untruthful Speech. And the title comes from the Chinese doctor in China who first reported the COVID and ended up being arrested and censored for untruthful speech, and later died of COVID. So that's where the title comes from. So we wanted to write a fictional story. It's about COVID, but it takes place a year before COVID, all about developing a super vaccine to help with future viruses, unbeknownst that COVID would strike, almost a year later. So that's kind of the premise of the book. Elizabeth, I'm not sure if you finished it or not, and I know you got a copy and we're reading it, so I hope you're enjoying it. We hope to write a second book. The Nick Grego character is a series, and we've sort of laid him out for future adventures. And Mike and I have been talking about where to take the story from here. But we think it's a good fictional story, a lot of suspense, a lot of good guys and bad guys. And I'm very proud of our work, especially for our first novel. We would never imagine, but once we started this thing, when Mike told me that a novel was at least over 80,000 words, we were writing our first 3 chapters, I sort of scratched my head going, wow, okay, how do we get to 83,000 words when we don't even have an outline? And that's the truth. We had no outline. We wrote chapter by chapter and created the story after each chapter. Mike would jump in after I wrote a chapter. I would jump in after he wrote one, and we'd take the story different directions. until we got at the point that we had to decide we needed a plot, a story, character development,
Yeah.
and an ending.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's a way you write a book, if that's unconventional, but that's how we did this. But it was exciting because we're writing this book, and I'm looking forward to Mike's next chapter to see, okay, what's he going to write? What's he going to say? He left me hanging. I want to know what's going to happen to this certain person. So I hope Mike felt the same way when I wrote characters and waiting for my chapter to come to him. So Mike, jump in, please.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to speak to was the plot of what we call the super vaccine. It sort of came out of my experience with multiple myeloma. I've been doing a lot of studying on the different treatments and cures, knowing that multiple myeloma is a disease that comes back. So you're never really totally in remission. It's going to come back on you, and a lot of different things are being studied in terms of leukemias and blood cancers. And one of the things that I had gotten into way before we even had the idea of the book was CRISPR. And so we were writing about this method called CRISPR, which we explain in the book is basically like cut and paste. There is a messenger RNA, and I think we've all heard that term, mRNA, that goes out and tries to find the bad part of a DNA chain and cut it out and put something in its place or leave it open. And came to find out that basically CRISPR is a method being used to study and being studied to treat cancers. And so CRISPR was developed out of studying viruses or studying bacterias, and CRISPR is the method that bacteria use to kill off viruses. So basically, my whole study into this whole thing of CRISPR turned into one of the main elements of the book. And what we come to find out 9 months after we really finished writing the book was that CRISPR or mRNA were the things that were being used to develop the vaccines. We did not know this when we were writing the book, so I guess we sort of called it right when we put everything together to create this super vaccine. So we were sort of proud of that too. And a lot of things are happening now that we projected to happen in the book are now happening, with vaccines being used as enticements. Certain countries using their excess vaccines to buy goodwill from other countries, those types of things. We bring that up in the book too. So like I say, we're pretty proud of what we came up with, and happy with the plot. And like Ross said, we probably, if you went to an author and said, is this the way you want to write a book? They would say, heck no. You got to do it the other way. But we got lucky. I felt we really put something together here, and it's a fun read. It really is.
There were some moments when he wrote the book, especially with some of the research that Micah did with CRISPR, that once we decided to publish this thing, we were expecting a call from the government saying, how did you find all this information? Mike's expertise in that area was great. And just for the record, my expertise is not breaking into labs and stealing vaccines or espionage, but that's kind of where I focused my writing on. So we definitely had two different talents that brought this book together, and I think we make such a great team. That's why we want to write our second book and go together. Meanwhile, it also inspired both of us to sort of continue writing. Mike started another novel on his own. I'm working on one as well, and some stories. So we're kind of looking. Donna earlier talked about retirement and what do you want to do, and I was very interested in her presentation because I'm around the corner from that. I would never have thought that once I do retire, that maybe writing might be a thing. And as long as I have a great partner like Mike, because he's very inspirational. I could tell you I would not got through this first book without him, because having sort of like having two brains, it was great. So, but enough inspiration that we're both writing. We share each other's stories, give each other feedback on the stories, and so it's great. I appreciate Mike for that. I don't know if you guys know, we've been childhood friends since 7th grade. He kept
So,
in contact
question.
this whole time. So
Question.
across the country. He's in North Carolina, and I'm in Oklahoma City.
Okay, I have a question. So, and there are a few questions out there people want to hear from you about, primarily though, but untruthful speech. At the context, it sounds as though you were trying to answer or trying to create a demand for more honest dialogue, which is something we can never get too much of. I don't know about you or the audience, but I love open, honest, concrete, and sincere dialogue. Even if you can't answer the questions, I would appreciate, the comments to say, don't know. I mean, it is as if, when people you ask or are asked questions, you're expected to be manipulated in some way. So the title, Untruthful Speech, drives the demand. It drives a comment. Just comment on that, if you will. And then I think Donna had the question about the framework for creating and writing the book, if you could. Just a few minutes.
The untruthful speech, again, it is important to be honest with communication. Of course, we wrote a fictional book that is all based on the research of vaccines, and I think it's a very important subject to have. Some of the things, of course, we made up about it, but at the end of the day, what we did at the very end of the book is we wrote some real stats on there. Even though it's fictional, we wrote about how many people have been infected with the COVID-19. At time of publication, we wrote how many people had died of COVID in the U.S. and the COVID reports out of China. We wanted factual information on there to say, hey, even though we're writing a fictional book, it's based on historical aspects that's actually taking place. The book ends, not to want to give away too much, but the book ends February of 2020, and that's when the first reports of COVID is reported in the U.S., and we kind of left it there. And I think it's a very strong statement that whoever reads this book thinking it's fictional is going to get to the very end saying, wow, that did take place. We were all a part of it. A big experience that we all are still going through, and hopefully we'll see the light in the tunnel to get out of this. But it doesn't mean there will not be future, viruses out there. And so we just need to be aware, and I think we need to be honest with how we can prepare ourselves for the next one.
Mike and Ron, we are having a marketing roundtable with our fiction authors. Would you all be able to stay for that?
What I plan on doing, I'm in Kansas City working, so I plan on driving back to Oklahoma City, but I'm going to call in.
Okay.
That way I can at least get the audio. I'm going to be in the car for 5 hours, so I could do a lot of listening. Mike, I think, is committed for the afternoon, so I'll do my best to call.
That's great. So thank you all so much. And Donna, would you like to go back again? Donna?
Absolutely.
We're ready for you again.
That would be great.
We have an action-packed morning, as you all can see.
Yes, and I will be back.
It always is.
I will be back. I have I'm on a vacation with my family, so I got some grandchildren to go take care of. But I will be back at noon.
Okay.
Enjoy the grandkids.
Thanks. Bye. See you then.
See you later.
Okay, so Donna, we are ready for you.
So, we were on slide 10. I hate to jump back in the middle, but I think we can get the flow of things. So we had just talked about our college plans and how to save for that, and all the different ways through loans and grants and scholarships, and also cash value life insurance.